And Luis, I wanted to ask you, particularly coming from TASA, the largest supplier in the world, and I think one of the companies that is certified by IFFO. Could you talk a little bit about how these industries are kind of moving from a commodity industry to the seller of a strategic ingredient, where I think companies in Peru are starting to kind of ask questions about who their potential customers are, and just talk about that process.
Sure. Thanks, Matt, for the question. So first of all, you have to kind of look back at history, and a lot of Peruvian fish meal used to be sold in bulk shipments to China and sold through a couple of traders that were based in Hong Kong, and it was a very arm's length contractual relationship, and the Peruvians had not much idea of where the fish meal was going, what it was being used for, other than it's for compound feed. That has evolved over time. The Peruvian companies have gone. I mean, obviously, they had started having a relationship with the Chilean feed companies and the European feed companies, especially on the aqua side. But more and more, they started developing relationships directly with the large feed companies. Haida, Grow Best, Tongwei, large on the aqua side, but also big companies like Twins and others on the pig feed side. And over time, we've learned, we've figured out kind of where, Peruvian fish meal goes. And we're very lucky in Peru. We have a single species, biomass. So that allows us to have a relatively stable quality of fish meal. It's not always perfectly stable, but it's relatively stable. And so you can really kind of, we've discovered over the time that, our fish meal is really on the higher end. And so you need to look for the customers that make feed for higher end, I'm going to say animals or fish. For example, there's no point putting Peruvian fish meal in a catfish feed diet, because catfish is so cheap that you're going to make the feed become too expensive. So you have to look at those the kind of the more niche segments. And we consider those to be, for example, carnivorous species or high-end aqua species. And so we had mapped out where are all the species that we're very relevant for, and where we should be selling our super prime fish meal. Because just for the audience to know, Peruvian fish meal can be split into several different qualities, of which the most expensive one is called super prime. Actually, and then comes prime, Taiwan, Thailand, and standard. These all have different levels, different parameters. For example, the protein, ash, and others, and fats and others, and TVN. And so if you can figure out which of your customers really need your product, for example, Peruvian fish meal in baby pigs is critical. After the 3 weeks after the baby pigs are born, when they start switching to a diet that has fish meal in it, and that was particularly important during the African swine fever period, when even though overall demand dropped because in China that segment, the pig industry would consume about over 600,000 tons of fish meal a year. That dropped because the herd got culled almost 50%. But the inclusion rates within the diets for baby pigs increased because they wanted to make sure that the baby pigs would survive, because the price of pig was going through the roof because there were any more pigs. And the number one preferred meat in China is pigs. So, I think ourselves as TASA, but I think others in the industry have understood, hey, I have a very high quality fish meal. I need to place it where it's valued, where the feed is a very high quality feed. And you have to know which segments those are. And it takes time. It takes time, and you have to learn to get to know your customers. It's no longer an arm's length contractual relationship. It's really, how can we work together? How can the feed company open its kimono a bit, or its doors a bit, and say, listen, I'm willing to discuss more of the nutritional elements of your product. Because to be fair, the Peruvian companies had never really focused on what is the nutritional value of our feed, other than kind of knowing what the protein levels and a few things like that. And I think that's changing now. I think there's a lot more focus on, we need to know how good our product is.
And there's a question on if basically at which stage the alternatives can really kick in. And I think, Luis, I'll ask you this question. Yourselves at TASA, were you sort of looking at models at which these alternatives would effectively come in and take some market share in agriculture?
I guess for us, because of the quality of Peruvian fish meal, it was never so much a concern that we're going to be replaced. I think it's about being complementary, different ingredients being complementary, ourselves knowing that, but also ourselves knowing. I should preface that also by saying that, again, we look at the different species. So, will Peruvian fish meal be a large factor, for example, in Vaname shrimp farming in the future? I think we're going to get substituted a little bit more there. But will we get substituted in yellow croaker or yellowtail kingfish in Japan? Not so much because of those higher levels of quality. So I think when we look at by 2030 we need so much protein. You're gonna need these alternatives because as much as the Peruvian industry has had we've had a relatively stable biomass the last couple of years, and actually this last biological year, which is from November to about now, is almost 40% better than the previous biological year. You never quite know. So I think there's a lot of opportunity within the industry to something that we haven't mentioned at all is the technology that we could use, like the Internet of Things, data analytics. There's a lot of things being done to make the factories more efficient in terms of not just trying to get the most out of the fish itself, although obviously we've tried to do that, but I think we're coming close to a point where most of the Peruvian industry has gotten very close to maximizing the recovering just about every amount of protein they have in some of the water that brings the fish in, for example. So I think they're kind of good there. But the next frontier, I think, is how do you improve the quality of the fish meal and try to make as much super prime as you can. And that's a really high quality fish meal that, like Dominique mentions, has some really great nutritional factors, which you can then mix in with either lower quality fish meal or insect meal or something else. So, and actually, I believe, and actually I was told by my customers in China, well, no, we already do that. I mean, yes, I'll use you in, as proven fish meal in a certain percentage, but then I've got all these other fish meals that I'm using as well in the same feed formula. And I know that you're going to give me this level of amino acids and a few other factors that they wouldn't tell us what they were. But I can also use, fish meal from much lower quality, even from byproduct meal as well to optimize that formula. So it's a case of those companies figuring out how to create the appropriate mix of ingredients in that feed formula that hits their price point. Because again, it's always that feed formula, that secret feed, calculation they have that allows them to get that price point that works for their aquaculture marketplace. Right.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask you, what's your outlook for the Peruvian industry over the next year or two? Obviously, I think there's a better prospect biologically. What's your take on Peru particularly?
So on the biomass side, things look quite good. We had the last fishing season, which was just about to wrap up. So Center North 2021 was actually the government kind of withheld some of the amount of quota they could have given because the biomass was very, very healthy, which surprised a lot of people. The thought was it'd be more around a 3 million quota, and it ended up being 2.5. So, but that tells you that the government is keeping an eye on the biomass, and along with IMARPE and the Minister of Production, they're managing that biomass. So I think from that perspective, we're okay. Will a Nino happen? Probably. I think, the last one was 2017. So at some point we're due for another one. The challenge right now is political. The presidential elections are about to be determined in the next week or so, but not from the voting. The voting's been done since June 6th. Now it's really a case of tabulating and the votes and ensuring that any votes that were protested against are getting analyzed to make sure there's no fraud. But the way it looks like we'll probably have a communist government And that always scares industry, because there's a big history of industries being nationalized in Peru. The fishing industry was nationalized; it almost killed it. And so, could that happen again? Maybe. So that's something that we'll have to evaluate as the July 28th is when the next president will be sworn in. And we'll have to see where who his minister of production is and what they plan, because for an industry that brings in so much dollar revenue, maybe they'll bring about $1 billion in of revenue with this fishing season. That will draw the attention of the government. After the copper mining, and agriculture, the fishmeal industry has a target on its back. So that has to be factored in. We just have to see where that goes.
And I'm going to just allow one more question. I'd like to pretty much give the same question to Luis. In terms of, like, do you see from an industry producer perspective, $3,000, $4,000 fish meal and some kind of convergence for the alternatives?
So during my time at TASA, we did do some modeling of prices, but we never got to those levels. And I believe the one of the FAO reports, now the name escapes me, and it's public information, also did a calculation on fish meal prices, and I don't think it ever reached those levels. For me, because a $2,000 fish meal does exist, but I would probably say that's Alaskan pollock that's used for a very specific application in eel feed. But I think a typical price, or more like I'd say more price that reflects like an equilibrium in price and demand, which means you're looking, China's going to consume about 1.8 to 1.9 million tons of fish meal a year, and the rest of the world will be able to supply that. Then I think you're looking more around $1,500 a ton. And will that increase a bit? Yes, I think it will, but to $3,000 or $4,000 a ton, by that point, I think other ingredients will have lowered their prices to enter the market. So, and I think that's one of the challenges right now is a lot of those other ingredients, being the insects that need so much power. You need power to generate the food for the insects, for example, or the bacteria, depending on which technology you use, that requires a lot of energy as well. If you're going to sell that at $3,000, you'd better have a amazing amino acid and nutritional factors profile to be able to compete. And because, like I said, I think fish meal will always tend to revert back to that around $1,500 price. Granted, right now it's higher. I think the average price of a super prime in Peru is around $1,650. So yes, we're in a situation where the price is a little bit higher, but it's for $1,500 for me is kind of like a go-to price that all ingredients should kind of go for. And if those novel proteins can't get to that level, then I'd be a little bit concerned.
Right. And on the oil, is it different?
I think the oil. I think is going to depend. The oil it depends so much on the EPA DHA profiles, because you either go to the feed industry or you sell to the human consumption industry. And although the human consumption industry never blew up in terms of demand as we thought it would, and I'm talking about 10 years ago when a lot of fishing companies invested in generating higher quality omega oil in the sense of refining and concentrating. The demand has been growing, and I think the whole COVID the pandemic really pushed the use of supplements for your personal health. So I think that's driven a lot of demand there. But again, the price of algae oil, I think from the last time I looked at it, was still far off the price of fish oil. So will it get there? I hope so, because we're going to need it. But they were still. I thought they were pricing themselves completely at a premium that was way beyond what for example, the salmon guys would need to hit those certain EPA DHA levels.